We wanted today on the show talk about the postseason evaluations that you do with your players. And I'm sure that that goes into it. Like, how did we do as a staff and the evaluation that you do as a staff? And then transitioning that, then how does that affect our players individually? And that's where we want to kind of spend our time today. How soon do you like to do that? And what is the process that goes into getting that information to those players?
Yeah, we did ours right away. We lost in the Sun Belt quarterfinals, had an opportunity to go to postseason. We were just we were limping into the postseason with injuries and just being banged up. So opted not to go to postseason. The next week we sat down and met. Every coach has a position group or a handful of players they're responsible for. So we put together a player improvement plan, just kind of a recap. But first, we sent them a Google form, which I think is super important for every coach to do. I did it at the high school level. Our head coach at App was already doing it, so we continued, and we tweak it every year. But it's really great to get their perspective. And then as the coach going in, you know where the conversation is going. I think sometimes as coaches, we are hesitant to ask questions because we don't want hard feedback. But the feedback is invaluable. So if it's something that maybe coaches out there have been hesitant to do, I would strongly suggest doing it even after this season, even though we're a little bit removed. But some of the things I've learned to take with a grain of salt, like you read something and like you're like, hey, like it's kind of harsh, but sometimes they just don't have anything else to put. They don't feel very strongly. It's just say, if we could change this, it might maybe this, and then you read it and you take it as, kind of a shot. So a lot of times just talking through those things will get you on the same page, and kind of get their perspective. So once we get all that information, really as our jobs as assistants, we would take our position group and we broke down kind of their entire profile. We broke it down into 4 phases, which I got from Fergus Conley. He's got a really good article on like the 4 coactives, and it's technical, which is your skill; tactical, which is their understanding of basically what like in the States, we kind of say X and O or basketball IQ. How well do they understand our system? Physical, strength, speed, agility, size. Those can be strengths or constraints. And then the mental side, we talk about next play or their mental toughness, how connected they are to their teammates. Do they see value in their role? All those things. And I think when you break it up like that, what becomes a good process is to look at which one is their strength. Okay. Like, so for me, I'm not the biggest individual, Tony. We've met in person. You can attest to that. So I'm like 5'7", maybe 5'8", if I like stretch in the morning. My potential limiter would be the physical, right? Like what's going to prevent me from going to the next level or from being a big impact on any basketball team? It would be my size. So every player, if you kind of go through your roster and just pick a player, they probably have a big potential limiter out there. And I think this is really valuable because, like, for instance, I've coached players in the past that were gym rats. They were always in there getting shots, working. They wanted to open the weight room, all this stuff. But their potential limiter was the mental side. Just not very tough mentally, would emotionally up and down all the time. Just was the world was rocked on a daily basis. It was roller coaster. So just had to sit down and have the conversation. Like, we can do all this work, but what's going to prevent you from having a great senior season is all up here. So then you can kind of formulate a plan in the off season to close that gap. Like, this is where you want to be. These are your goals, but this is really what's holding you back, but also highlight the strengths too. But you're really skilled. You understand what we do, and physically you can play in this league. So this is, we're going to work on all those strengths, but we're going to really try to bring that potential limiter. And a lot of times just bringing awareness to it.
Are there questions that go along with that, or are they like rating themselves on a scale in connection to those 4 things? Or how do you get them to give you the specific feedback?
Yeah. So I think one creative way is have them fill out a scouting report on themselves, or just how do you think opposing coaches in the conference or the league are describing you? And we watch film on the bus a lot with our group. Just usually have like a game day practice. We're busing to the airport or bus into the game. I'd get my players up. We would talk, and we had like a previous year scouting report or something. And one of our players was like, oof, like they had me as like a driver only. And I'm like, well, what would you say? And they're like, driver only. So I was like, well, that's great. We got some awareness there, you know? So I think that's one way. I think if you kind of you do the rating system, you just have to be kind of careful. Like I love rating systems where if you say 1 to 5, but can't say 3. So it's like a lot of times it's 2 or 4. I had somebody that was recruiting one of my guys when I was in high school, and he said, how competitive is he? Scale of 1 to 10, can't say 7 or 8. So I was like, man, like that's a great way to ask it. So I think sometimes when you do that, that's a good way. But we all know that players are going to kind of think they're a little better than they are. And in some degree, it's not a bad thing, right? We want confident players. But I think as coaches, we have the film, we have the evidence. So I think the purpose of the meeting might just be to kind of get to a mutual understanding.
How long are those meetings?
You don't want them to be too long, right? Too long might mean they're going south. But it depends. Like with some of them, like let's say a player, their potential limiter is the mental. We might just talk about that and just like, look, you were uncoachable, or we were, sick all the time or injured all the time because we weren't taking care of our body, whatever it is. Those tend to be a little shorter. With your more experienced players, maybe players that are stepping into a leadership role, those tend to be longer. Sometimes you want the player talking a lot, so sometimes longer the better. But I would say 30 minutes about.
I'm not hearing you say we're sitting there and showing them like film and breaking stuff down.
Not really. I would have like their season stats. If they were a returner, their stats compared to last year. We would have their shot chart, which they saw throughout the year anyway. But like we had one of our guards led the conference in field goal percentage and didn't know, So and one of her offseason goals was to increase her 2-point field goal percentage, which she did by like 20%. So, and if you asked her, she would have no idea, but she did a really good job of just being more balanced, playing off 2, finish better. So a lot of things like that is good to highlight because they're having a lot of success and they're not even aware of it.
Have you all started workouts with them yet?
We have. So right now we're allowed 8 hours. We have a little 5-week block here before we get to the summer. So we're allowed 8 hours a week. We're really using 4 of those in the weight room. So we're lifting 4 days a week. And then we're doing individual workouts. You get 2 a week. And that's just usually 1-on-0 with the coach. Just get in there and we're just focused a lot on the technical aspect of it. And then the other 2 days for 1 hour apiece, we're just competing. And so basically we're, kind of going into those postseason workout skill development stuff is we're looking at the things you do well, and we're going to lean on those things. That way your strengths become even greater. And then also maybe look at just what I would encourage coaches to do is look at one thing that's keeping them off the floor. So we have all these things that get you on the floor. We're going to work on those, your ability to shoot, attack off the bounce, finish. But it's like maybe we have a guard that is just like talented, can score, but just cannot defend the ball at this level, or would really struggle against pressure at this level. Like that's kind of the big question mark. Then we're going to hit that pretty hard in the off season, just because this is time where you can really hone in on those things and don't have to worry about a team practice. And I love this time of year. So we focus a lot on just like 3, 4, 5 things with a player. So like, for instance, one player we're working a lot on at Barkley, she can be elite at that. That's kind of her added value, where if she adds that to her game, she's going to just really turn the corner. And then we're looking at those weaknesses, like I said, as far as like changing their shot, maybe this is a different kind of approach. I don't like to mess with shots unless they're missing left to right. But I'll just ask the question, like, if you could change one thing about your shot, what would it be? And sometimes they'll say, like, I think it's too flat, or sometimes my feet feel weird. And then it's like they're offering the suggestion, or they're offering the change, and you're just giving suggestions. I'll even say, I used to say, like, hey, let's do this with your shot. Just don't know that that's productive, because to change something, it takes a lot of work. I'll just say, hey, can I make a suggestion? Completely up to you whether you want to change this or not. And then maybe you go into like how motivated are you to changing your shot. So we'll get a lot of reps. What we try to do in those workouts is build multiple efforts. I feel like a lot of coaches talk about multiple efforts, but we'll have a rep where it's just like make a move, go finish, dead. So we'll do some things like I'm working with a player right now where we're going to score everything twice just so she's willing to go get her own rebound. We don't stop playing. So make her miss. She's going to grab it. She's going to score. Love to do like multiple actions, multiple shots. So we're not just working on a shot or a drive. So I always have an extra ball. We might go, we always go to like 10 makes with something. So we might start, we're going to shoot threes till you miss 2 in a row. Maybe we make 3. Once you miss 2 in a row, we're going to drive into a full speed paint pull. Make that's 4. And then now you're going to maybe get into a Barkley against me, live defender. And you make that, you go 5. And then we'll start over, new spot, shooting threes, and we'll just go till we make 10 and then move on to something else.
So let me bring it back to the player evaluations. You said some of times those evaluations really aren't connected to stuff on the court, but I'm assuming you're still, even if that's not what you've talked about, do they leave with something physical? Let me ask that first. Do they leave with something physical, piece of paper that has all this stuff on it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I put together like a PowerPoint presentation for all my players where we kind of broke down the technical, tactical, physical, mental, and then we came up with a spring improvement plan for them. That way they know, like, if I'm in the gym by myself, we encourage them to go get shots or whatever. They know what they're looking at. And they also know where we're coming from too, and why we're doing the things that we're doing in the workout. So yeah, absolutely. They get the presentation. We also, like with sports code, we can easily pull their shots. Some of them, like their off-season prep was to watch their shots and grade them, whether they thought it was a small advantage shot, a big advantage shot, a neutral shot. That way they're kind of learning some shot selection, and maybe we can kind of get on the same page there as far as what I'm seeing and what they're seeing.
I want to warn coaches and confirm this for me if you think it's correct, but you don't have to talk about everything that's there on that sheet. Like the PowerPoint, I'm sure you didn't go through the whole PowerPoint that lasts 45 minutes. And then the kid leaves and they don't really know what they're supposed to do with all that. They just had a ton of information that was just thrown at them, and that they may have grasped what you thought was important and they may not have. But it almost seems like it's kind of all used together to then give them this is why I ask if the off-season workouts had started. They can immediately go into the gym the next week, the next day, whatever, and actually start implementing the things that you gave them either during the meeting or the things that you gave them in the presentation.
For sure. And a lot of times with our players, we only went over that last sheet, like kind of the last slide. Here's the improvement plan, kind of have the why built in. But our meetings were like much more conversational. It wasn't us like, this is what you need to do. It was more of like, how can we better serve you? If you could change some things about what we did this past season, what would that be? A lot about just kind of the whole program overall, not just about them and their development. I think sometimes we have a tendency of coaches to go in with just like a fixing mindset. Like, we're going to spend this 20 minutes and fix this player rather than just have a conversation about the season.
And I think that really breeds like the partnership, like we're all in this together rather than just I'm in charge, do what I say, get better, or you're not going to play next year.
Absolutely.
So if you want to summarize all of that, what do you feel like is the key to an effective postseason evaluation meeting?
Them having tangible things that we should start, stop, and keep doing as a program, just to get their perspective and then get their feedback on where they felt they improved. I think that's a big thing. It's just like we also go through of like, we always ask the question and then we always kind of present what we found. And the more things that are common there, the better. It means that we're seeing it through the same lens. So definitely highlighting the areas that they improved. And then, like I said, I think identifying the potential limiter is huge. And then tangible steps of what we're going to do to close the gap. We have some players, committing to shooting extra shots or getting in the gym by themselves because those are the commitments they made. And then moving forward, like, I think it's important as coaches, like, what comes of that is just the conversation before multiple conversations down the road, right? Mm-hmm. How are your workouts going? Are you committed to eating right? Right? Like, what's the effort been like in the weight room? Really, that's just the primer for you holding them accountable and supporting them in that journey later down the line rather than just jumping on them. It's not something we've talked about. So kind of like you said, the partnership of a mutual agreement, and then you're going to come up with these commitments, and I'm just going to kind of support you and hold you accountable as we move forward in our 5-week off season.
I know we have a lot of different ages, places where coaches are at that are listening to this. And one of the things that I found for younger coaches, one is giving them too much information, but two is also them leaving with vague information. They don't really know what they're supposed to do to improve. And I found it useful to kind of help them understand, like, this is the thing, you said this already, but it went by quickly, was this is the thing that's keeping you from playing more. I think that, like, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line question that they want answered. And if you could just give them a bunch of vague things. But on the flip side of that, I've been guilty of this before, but going almost into the meeting and I don't know exactly what they need to improve to be able to actually get more playing time.
Yeah, like the unfortunate thing with, like, sometimes when we don't know, it's like you can do these things, and the reality is somebody might just be better,
Yeah.
But I think you hit a good point of, like, not being vague. I think players want honesty, right? They want you to be really honest, brutal honesty. Although sometimes it's tough to deliver that.
Yeah.
It's like if we're not honest with them, how can we expect them to go get better at what we want? And then that's kind of our role as a coach too. Is like, what we should be masters at is, this is what you need to get better at and how. That's the most important piece, because mom, dad, casual basketball fan can say, like, hey, they don't shoot it well. It's like, okay, well, how do you get better at that? Or they don't handle the ball very well. Well, there's some things that we have to do in order to raise that skill level, where easy to identify, sometimes it's not as simple to fix. So the more we can give them, the better.
So I do want to help. I know we have college and high school players, coaches that listen to this, and I do want this. Anytime I feel a little bit nervous when I have college coaches speaking, because then at the end, sometimes coaches are like, well, that works for them. They've got a big staff that can do all that. You've dealt with this with a small staff at a high school. What would you say are, like, these are the essentials that you need to have, or this is what you put together? You mentioned, like, the Google sheet was very helpful to you all. I know you've used a lot of those in the past. What would be the things that you would say, do these things, even if you have a limited staff, you can at least do this and it will help your program?
Yeah, I would definitely say the Google form, something that's easy. It's quick. You can gather information that's going to organize it for you. That is a must. Before any meeting with any player, or just certain team meetings, depending on the nature of the meeting, we're always doing a Google form. That is the primer. That is the conversation before the conversation. And it gives the players kind of a heads up of what you're going to talk about, right? So you're almost prepping them rather than them going in blind. You ask them a question and they have like they're kind of nervous, right? Because they're in the coach's office and they got like 2 seconds to answer a question that they haven't really thought about. So I think it forces some reflection on their part. So definitely the Google form. I think it's a great idea for them to write a scouting report on themselves, like we talked about. I think you can do that at all levels, where they're kind of doing the work for you. I do think if you have a staff, kind of breaking up your team into smaller groups can help, and then have a staff member kind of focus on one group in the off season, where they can maybe just watch a little extra film or pull some clips of them from Huddle or whatever you're using. I think those examples sometimes help. And then also, like, one thing we try to do is, if a player says something, we might not agree with that. We might just say, well, can you give me some examples of that? I'd always challenge them. Some coaches I've heard, even at the high school level, have asked their players to do the scouting report and then find clips support that. I haven't gone that far, just to go through a whole game to find a couple clips is asking a lot of the high school in the off season.